for me to be there. I spoke to the president shortly after the ceremony, and I told him I'm not sure he's given me a greater honor.
The presumed remains of U.S. troops from the Korean War were returned to American soil.
We saw this promise kept by North Korea as evidence of the progress that we are making, and we continue to remain hopeful.
A possible break in the weeks-long search for missing Iowa college student Molly Tibbetts. Police now looking into a reported sighting in Missouri.
And you have no idea how tough I've been.
It appears the border battle is coming to Washington sooner rather than later.
I say, hey, if you have a shutdown, you have a shutdown. Now, the shutdown can also take place after the election.
Mueller has agreed to reduce the number of questions for President Trump in a potential interview.
You think they're at the end of it? They should render their report and put up a shut up. What do you got?
You are looking at images that we watched live last night here on the Fox News channel. 65 years after hostilities ended in the Korean War, caskets bearing the supposed remains of 55 American GIs arrived at Joint Base Pearl Harbor, Hickam, yesterday.
Vice President of the United States did speak, just addressed it. Also, it hit home with him because his dad fought in the war, talked about the war, and also would refer to the fact that don't call me a hero. The heroes are the ones that didn't come back. 55, we hope, have come back. We're not sure exactly what we got from North Korea. We hope for the best. As the Defense Department says, we're not really sure. Right. But I'll add to this. I mean, we have 200. 7,000 missing, but 200 that we know of that they have the remains of.
That's right. There are 55 boxes that came back with the remains. We're not sure how many of those belong to. Right. The president sat down with Kim Jong-un at that summit, and Kim Jong-un promised him that he would do this, and he did. And the president sent out a tweet yesterday thanking him for that. Pete Hegseth is in Hawaii with the vice president. Pete, we're seeing these coffins, these boxes with the American flag. Yesterday they were in South Korea with the United Nations flag, but it's beautiful to see them with the red, white, and blue finally back home on American soil, right?
Boy, that's exactly right. A lot of people commented on that. It's great to see them in the red, white, and blue, home where they belong. This was the arrival for the first time back on American soil. Just a few miles behind us in Hangar 19 on Air Force Base Hickam. It was an emotional ceremony. The vice president presiding over it, military families, Korean War veterans, and you could feel the sense that it was all good, right, and true, that America, in a small part, not a small part, in a big part, but for a few men, was fulfilling a promise they'd meant to be fulfilled for a long time. And I had a chance after that ceremony to speak with the vice president, clearly still affected, just off the phone with the president, talking to him about it. And he shared with me, and I asked him the question, what does it say about our country that 65 years later, we're honoring these men the way we are? Listen to what the vice president said.
Truly was powerful, and you watched the dignity with which they treated every single flag-draped container. What is it about America where we say, we're going to bring you home, even 65 years later, with dignity?
Well, you're a combat veteran. My father was a combat veteran. There is a promise, sometimes spoken, often not spoken, that we leave no man behind. And that's what great nations do. And today what the American people saw, and frankly the world saw, was the United States of America saying that we will keep that promise even nearly 7 decades later. And we will afford the honor and the recognition and the compassion that the families of our fallen and our fallen are due.
Guys, more of that interview later on in this hour and in the 8 o'clock hour as well. The president, obviously, vice president, expanding on those comments.
Surely. And Pete, yesterday when you were live from Honolulu, you told us about how your flight on Air Force Two with Vice President from New York City toward Honolulu made a stop in California, and you picked up 2 travelers, Rick Downs, who lost his father when he was 3, and Diana Brown Sanfilipino, who lost her father when she was 4 years old, and her only memory of her father was being at the airport saying goodbye, Daddy.
Unbelievable. And we had a chance to talk to Diana as well, who was mentioned by the vice president. To get a sense of how much this really means to those who lost service members in the Korean conflict, just talk to Diana. Here's what she had to say.
I found myself looking at every single one as they came out of the plane and asking, and in my mind was going, are you there, Daddy? Are you coming home? I hope you're back home and can rest in peace in the country you served. So each flag drape case, that went through my mind. And of course, there are other families. I don't know that my father's remains are there, but I ask that if my father isn't there, that all families who have a missing loved one have that chance to get their loved one back. And I blessed each case in my mind.
And in the background of that shot, guys, the vice president spending a long time with the troops and service members who were a part of that ceremony. If you watched it, and again, I want to give a lot of credit to the Fox News channel, which carried that program live when, unfortunately, other networks decided to basically ignore it and cover the whatever other news of the day they thought more worthy. But we were there, and it was very powerful.
I'm glad you were there. I think it's disrespectful for networks not to cover this. This was a top story yesterday, obviously.
Yeah. Look at the cover. Look at the cover of the New York Post today. Coming home, 55 Americans finally back from North Korea. All right, Pete, thank you very much. In introducing Diana to everybody, apparently, she left her dad at the airport when she was 4. Her father was hit by ground fire. He was on a recon mission on December 31st, 1952. He was first listed as MIA and then a year later declared dead. And apparently the mother got a shipment of his belongings from Korea, but she never talked about her dad. Right. Ever. And so there was never any closure. And then fast forward to about 2007, 2008, her husband saw an appeal for DNA. And so she submitted the DNA, and she's part of that database. Because she would like to know whether or not her father is in one of those 55 cases.
And it will take a couple of years, or it could take a couple of months to find out who's there. And because we only got one set of dog tags, the president went out and said a kind tweet to Kim Jong-un for keeping his word and starting the process of sending home the remains of our great and beloved fallen. Meanwhile, the other major story was another passionate one for the president of the United States, and that is immigration and crackdown and getting funding for the border. In the meantime, one of the first things he said he wanted to do was crack down on sanctuary states. He got rebuked by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals yesterday, which has got to be disturbing, by a 2-1 margin. And then he got find out, too, that there's something maybe politically that plays to Republicans' advantage, but you have to wonder what people are thinking, and that is the push to blame ICE for the problems with illegals in our country, and for some, doubling down in banning ICE.
Zephyr Teachout is a Democratic candidate. She is running for the AG, the Attorney General of the state of New York. She promises to prosecute ICE if she's elected. Listen.
ICE was born in xenophobia in the time after 9/11 and has grown up to become a tool of fear and illegality. And as Attorney General, I will continue to speak out against ICE. I will prosecute ICE for their criminal acts. We have stories of consistent abuse within ICE. The idea that we could call this law enforcement is a real offense to the idea of law itself. And as AG and as a candidate for AG, I feel like it's really important to speak out to abolish ICE.
Can you imagine if somebody like this wins?
Well, right now, Brian, she is in 3rd place on the Democratic side, according to a Siena College poll that was just taken a week or two ago. She knows about the law. She is a law lecturer at Fordham University. But what's interesting is, while a number of Democrats are calling for the abolition of ICE, she's talking about actually prosecuting people in ICE for breaking the law. Unfortunately, there are a number of people who are on the political left who confuse the family separations, which were done by the Border Patrol, with ICE. ICE had nothing to do with the family separation.
Well, ICE goes in and they try to protect Americans, hardworking, good Americans, from illegal criminals. And she says ICE needs to be abolished. So much is wrong with ICE. Immigrants shouldn't be thought of as national security threats. She said ICE is cruel and illegal, and their behavior is unconstitutional.
So she wants to prosecute him.
Yeah, unbelievable. I want you to weigh in on that. Also tell you, to get his opinion, Ron Vitiello would be with us. He's ICE's acting director. And we had the former acting director on last night with Shannon, so he reacted to that soundbite that he saw live on television first, and you could see his anger.
Yeah, Ronald's going to come on with us later in the show, so you have to stick around for that. But send your comments in, and we can read some of them to him.
That's right. So as you can see, we've got a very busy Thursday. Thank you very much for joining us. And right now, Jillian joins us with some more headlines.
That's right. A number of headlines that we're following. So let's start with this Fox News alert and a first-hand look from inside the plane that crashed and burst into flames in Mexico. Passengers screaming as the plane crashed, trying to take off in bad weather. All 103 people on board survived, including an American priest.
Smoke was unbearable. A burning sensation you breathed it. It was pretty dark. It was pretty bad. We didn't lose anyone. And that to me is a miracle. Thank God.
Yes, it is. Investigators now looking at the black box recorders. The man charged with murdering an Arizona state trooper with another officer's gun is out of the hospital and in jail. Police say Isaac King shot and killed rookie trooper Tyler Edenhofer during a struggle as he responded to a call. And in Milwaukee, thousands say a final goodbye to Officer Michael Mahalski. The 17-year veteran of the force was shot and killed trying to arrest a suspect. 34 police officers have been killed in the line of duty so far this year. Legendary college football coach Urban Meyer put on administrative leave by Ohio State University. The Buckeyes head coach accused of knowing about domestic violence allegations against an assistant and doing nothing. That assistant, Zach Smith, was fired last month. The school is investigating. President Trump meeting with a group of inner-city pastors at the White House for a roundtable discussion on prison reform. One pastor praising the president for supporting minorities.
To be honest, this is probably going to be and I'm going to say this at this table, the most pro-black president that we've had in our lifetime. This president actually wants to prove something to our community. The last president didn't feel like he had to.
The group also discussing how the low unemployment rate could help former prisoners get jobs. Let's look at your headlines. I'll send it to you.
Darrell Scott's the best spokesperson, but whatever the president's doing, and the numbers seem to see he's doing a lot, he doesn't talk about it.
Yeah.
He's got to start talking about it and see some of the programs.
All right.
Thanks, Jillian.
Jillian, thank you.
All right, coming up straight ahead, the TSA could soon end security screenings at more than 100 smaller airports. Is that really a good idea?
And we've been telling you about this elected official sparking nationwide outrage for kneeling during the Pledge of Allegiance. Well, one of the veterans who stood up to her is going to join us live next.
Kneel and turn your back on that flag. You turned it on half of this town.
In an era of online retail.
Well, she is at it again. A Connecticut town official first made national news when she took a knee during the Pledge of Allegiance at a meeting on July 16th. And then she did it again on Monday. But this time she was booed by many in attendance, including a Vietnam War veteran who slammed her for disrespecting our flag. Listen.
It says on my shirt, if you don't like the flag, I'll help you pack your bags and get the heck out of it. And turn your back on that flag. You turned it on half of this town.
That Vietnam War veteran, Calvin Bonnell, joins us now. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for inviting me here.
You're welcome. So you stood up and you made your point. You were it seemed very upset with what she did. Why?
Because to me, the flag is supposed to represent the United States. And when somebody kneels down and does not respect it, it goes along with the national anthem. You're supposed to stand up and present yourself to that situation as well as the flag. When I first went into elementary school, that was the first thing they taught us was respect for the flag and what it stood for. It just doesn't stand for the freedom, but it also stands for all the gentlemen, ladies in the service that have been killed in the line of duty. And when somebody kneels down in front of it, for me, it's a very disrespectful thing, because you should stand up and appraise these people as well as that flag of the United States.
Melissa Schlag was caught on tape saying that your town was fascist and racist, and then she went on a radio interview and she apologized for making it seem like all of Haddam was racist and fascist. She says couldn't be further from the truth. However, strong veins of fascism and racism run deep in Haddam. Do you agree with that?
I believe so. I'm out of Meriden, but she said it. She had her freedom of speech. She has her freedom of religion because of that flag and what that flag stood for with the veterans fighting for her natural rights and the Constitution.
Do you agree with her that your town is fascist and racist?
I really do not know on that point because I do not live in Haddam. I live in Meriden, Connecticut.
So you came over to Haddam to make your voice heard because you knew that she was probably going to kneel again?
Right.
Why was that important to you?
Because it's with the situation with her kneeling, she's done it before, she's made statements before, and I just figured it was about time some other people besides her town people let them know how they felt on it. We had about 75 people line up and give her the royal run.
Do you think she should resign?
I think so, because when she does something like that, she is not representing the constituents of that town in the right way.
It's hard to see her kneel, in my opinion, when we have the remains of these individuals who made the ultimate sacrifice come back. You hear from a young girl who lost her dad when she was 4 years old, and he was never there for her wedding or her graduation and that kind of thing. So many people have made sacrifices for the red, white, and blue. Thank you for what you've done.
We thank you for having me, and I appreciate it very much for this time.
Thank you. What happened to that missing Iowa student? The search for Molly Tibbetts is intensifying this morning. Molly's boyfriend joins us for his first live TV interview along with her father. Coming up next.
Quick headlines now. A federal appeals court delivers a helping hand to sanctuary cities and the growing anti-ICE movement. Listen to this. The liberal 9th District Court of Appeals ruling that it's unconstitutional for the White House to withhold funding from cities that protect illegals, which, by the way, is illegal. The DOJ calling that a victory for criminal aliens, and I can't argue. And 2 migrants busted after a man falsely claims to be the father of a 17-year-old girl while crossing into the United States. Border Patrol agents in Texas discovered she was actually 18, and the two are just friends. They even tried to use a fake birth certificate as part of the scheme. Steve.
All right, Brian, thank you. The search for missing University of Iowa student Molly Tibbetts now entering its 3rd week. Her boyfriend now suggesting she may have been kidnapped from his home, where she was dog sitting alone after a jog in the town where he says no one ever locks a door. And join us right now for his first exclusive live interview is that boyfriend, Dalton Jack, along with Molly's dad, Rob Tibbetts. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning.
Morning.
All right. Dalton, your comment yesterday about nobody locks their doors in your Iowa town got a lot of attention. What were you suggesting?
That just, it's a safe little community. You wouldn't expect anything like this to happen. You know, everybody was blindsided the fact that, you know, something like this did happen in our small little town.
Absolutely. I grew up in Iowa and Kansas, and growing up, we never locked our doors either, but I know that folks are locking their doors now. Rob, later today, you're going to have a press conference with Molly's mother. Tell us a little bit about that.
The press conference is to announce the established reward for the tip hotline through Crime Stoppers, and we'll be giving information about where people can donate to that. We're hoping that that will provide an enticement to people to come forward for information.
That's right. Dalton, the night she went missing, where were you?
In Dubuque, Iowa, about 100 miles away.
Because you have a construction job out there, right?
Yeah, we were working on a bridge up in Dubuque.
And she was watching your dogs at the house. And when was the last you talked to her?
Tuesday morning before I left, I just said goodbye.
Yeah. Since then, I know it's been driving you crazy and her father crazy and the entire family crazy, trying to put pieces together. Dalton, do you have any idea what may have happened?
No, I'm kind of just leaving all the investigating to the FBI and all the authorities that are on the case.
Do you have a theory?
Not really.
Okay. I know this week you and Molly were supposed to be in the Dominican Republic. Tell us what you were planning to do.
My brother was doing a destination wedding down there, and we were going to go down today, actually, for his wedding.
But that was canceled given what has happened with Molly. Rob, let's talk a little bit about one of the reasons you have come on television so frequently in the last week or so is because you feel that there is somebody out there, whether it's in Brooklyn, Iowa, or somebody who is just passing through, that saw Molly that night and knows something.
Whether they saw Molly or whether they saw something that was out of place, that seems insignificant, and they're reluctant to come forward with that information because they don't want to clog up the investigation. There is no information too insignificant. Or if they're suspicious about a loved one or a friend, that they're reluctant to turn into the authorities for something that they suspect. If they have nothing to hide, they have nothing to fear. And so turn that information over to the authorities and let them sort out what's right and what's wrong.
So far, Rob, how many tips have they received?
We don't know. We don't know anything about that. We rely on our partners in law enforcement to handle the search and the investigation. They share virtually no information with us, which is exactly the way we want it and the way they want it. We rely on them for that, and they rely on us to help keep Molly's story in the public conscious. And so then we rely on our media partners, you, and Fox has been absolutely terrific. We can't be more grateful to you for helping us and driving information to that tip line.
Well, you said that the police, do not keep you updated on all the tips that are coming in. There was one story in the Kansas City area yesterday that apparently at a Kansas City area truck stop, I think in the last week or two, out by Interstate 35, somebody thought they saw her in the cab of a semi-trailer truck. But they've done some investigating. They've looked at the video. It doesn't look as if there is anything to that lead. But there are a lot of leads, and it must make you feel good, Dalton, to know that there are so many people out there watching right now who are trying to find Molly.
Yeah, it's pretty heartwarming to know the entire, pretty much, nation has gotten our backs, and you know, they're all putting forth the effort to try to find her.
Rob, before we leave, what's the last thing you would like to tell everybody watching right now?
Just think about what you saw and call the authorities. I really think that's how we're going to get Molly back. I really do.
All right, fellas, thank you very much for joining us right now, live from Grinnell, Iowa. If anybody has any information about missing Molly Tibbetts, call the sheriff's office. The number is 641-623-5679. Hi.
Very touching moments as Taps is being played during that ceremony to mark the arrival of the remains of U.S. servicemen from the Korean War. That is in Honolulu.
That's something Pete Hegseth witnessed firsthand. He is live on the ground in Honolulu, Hawaii, where yesterday he had the chance to sit down with the Vice President of the United States after taking, I think, a 12-hour ride with him. Am I right, Pete?
That is exactly right. And no more powerful sound for my money than the sound of Taps, and what an appropriate moment for that as well. Yes, right after the ceremony, I had a chance to sit down with the Vice President, fresh from his remarks, presiding over a powerful ceremony. We asked him about that ceremony, but also a few issues hitting here at home for the President and the Vice President. Here's a portion of the interview with Vice President Mike Pence yesterday.
It isn't lost on me that today we're dropping off caskets instead of dropping bombs right now on that peninsula. Where are we in the progress toward that outcome? A great step today that is meaningful, but a lot of people will say, hey, they're still fueling and creating ICBMs. Where are we in getting to that ultimate goal?
Well, the only reason we're here today is because very early in our administration, President Trump took a strong stand and said that we would not tolerate the presence of nuclear weapons and missiles in the possession of North Korea that could threaten the United States or our allies. He took unprecedented steps to bring economic and diplomatic pressure to bear. And while many worried about that approach, what it did was bring North Korea to the negotiating table. And in that historic summit, he secured not just a commitment to bring our heroes home, which began today, but also a commitment to achieve the complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. And what I can tell you, Pete, is that we're continuing to work very diligently. The Secretary of State will be in the region again this week. Those negotiations and discussions are ongoing. As I said today, we saw this promise kept by North Korea as evidence of the progress that we are making, and we continue to remain hopeful that we will achieve the aim that's eluded the world for decades, a nuclear-free Korean Peninsula, and that will bring our boys home.
So you believe this is indicative of a process still very much on track?
We are very hopeful that in today's events there is further evidence that the promises made in Singapore by North Korea will be kept.
I want to turn to home for a second, though. The president spoke a lot recently about the potential for a shutdown if he doesn't get the funding for the wall. He said in March, I'll never again will I sign a budget that doesn't include funding for the wall. Will he truly, either before or after the election, shut the government down if he doesn't have the wall funded?
Well, I think it is very clear that from the campaign forward, President Trump has made it clear that a country without borders is not a country.
Some people say that he won't do it. He's bluffing.
Well, what I can promise you is that we're working with the Congress to make sure that we provide for the common defense, that we fund the government. There's a series of spending bills. But when it comes to border security, I know President Trump is prepared to take a strong stand and demand that this Congress respond to the American people, give us the funding to build a wall, to close those loopholes that are driving illegal immigration and human trafficking, support our border security, support organizations and agencies like ICE that are doing an incredible, courageous job across the country. And I expect the president's going to take that strong stand before the fall is out.
With the economy going where it is, you've been in Congress since 2001. Have you seen an economy like this before?
It really is extraordinary. I mean, I'll never forget on the campaign trail in 2016 in September when then candidate Donald Trump announced that we would have a national goal of 4% GDP growth in the economy, and it was rejected by virtually every
pigs are going to fly
economist in the country. And here we have, just last year, nearly 3% growth in the calendar year in our first year in office. And then thanks to the president's leadership and strong partners in Republican majorities in Congress, here we are the second quarter of this year, a 4.1% growth. And we think we're just getting started. When you see the tremendous increase in exports in the second quarter, when you see the tremendous increase in business investment, we see wages rising. I really do believe the best is yet to come. But it's all a result of the fact that President Trump has been working every day to keep his promises to the American people, to cut taxes, to roll back regulations, unleash American energy. And it's working, Pete.
You know, the vice president went on to talk as well about the pastor in Turkey, still there under house arrest, and how they're focused on bringing him back from a NATO ally. And also, as we talked about in the program already, the lack of coverage in the so-called mainstream media of this ceremony. So important to so many vets, to the progress on the Korean Peninsula, to keeping promises, yet unfortunately so many people not wanting to give credit to President Trump or Vice President Pence for making it happen. So more from that interview in the 8 o'clock hour of Fox and Friends, guys.
That's great.
Your show.
That's great, Pete. And of course, the Vice President was very clear that the welcome home ceremony that we saw yesterday got started with the June summit between our president and Kim Jong-un. And he said, promise kept. And they remain hopeful that eventually it does lead to denuking the Korean Peninsula.
Yep.
That's right. It doesn't happen unless that meeting happens. And it's a good faith step. Now they're focused on the real verification of the denuclearization. Right. So this is a good step, but more to come.
Yeah, more to come because satellite photos show they have not slowed down at all in missile manufacturing. So can't deny that. Thanks, Pete.
Thanks, Pete. They also slapped sanctions on the individuals that were responsible for arresting Pastor Brunson.
Right.
Hopefully that'll work and we can get him back home to America. Okay, let's hand it over to Jillian, who has some more headlines for us. Hey, Jillian.
That's right. Good Thursday morning to you at home as well. This is a story that has a lot of people talking right now. The TSA may be considering eliminating passenger screenings at some airports. According to CNN, more than 150 small and medium airports around the country could do away with the scanners in an effort to save $115 million annually. The report does not list the specific airports that could be affected. Nearly 4,000 firearms were found in bags at checkpoints across the country in 2017. That's nearly 10 firearms found per day. A woman is accused of intentionally crashing into a car over its Trump bumper sticker. Police say Chloe Wright drove into the car, bent its door, and then drove away in Hyannis, Massachusetts. The driver also claims she called him racist when he said he voted for the president. She reportedly pleaded not guilty in court to assault and vandalism charges. Cowboys quarterback Dak Prescott standing by his team's policy to stand for the flag despite backlash on social media.
I never said I didn't believe in the social injustice and things that's going on. I just said I didn't think the national anthem was the time. I mean, it's 2 minutes out of our day that we could also be spending just embracing what our country should be.
Prescott says he's ready to move past kneeling for the anthem and wants to find a better way for players to protest.
That's a leader.
Yeah, good for him.
Yeah, good job.
And you said he's getting backlash from people who disagree with him?
I mean, on both sides. There's backlash all over the place, but he is receiving backlash, yep.
Right. Ezekiel Elliott, too, feels the same way.
Well, he's with a team where they have to stand.
Right.
The boss has said.
Yeah, the boss has said you got to stand.
But he took it up a notch. He says, I choose to.
Good for him.
Meanwhile, thanks, Jillian. We've been telling you about the growing trade battle between the U.S. and China. How big is the economic threat to America? We are crunching the numbers because this story is unfolding right now.
Plus, a heart-wrenching moment inside a supermarket. The story behind that video right there is going to have you smiling all morning long.
Times I've been cheated on, and it's nice to know when I was left for dead. I was found and now I don't know these streets. I'm not the ghost you are.
Manny. Today, on the final day of our series, China, Friend or Foe, we focus on the country's economic threat to the U.S. Here to break it down is former State Department press officer Morgan Ortagus, who's still active in the military. Morgan, great to see you. So you also believe that China has overtaken us, even though the numbers say we're still leading.
So if you look at nominal GDP, China is the second largest economy in the world. However, if you look at purchasing power, they're the largest economy. If you look at they're the largest manufacturer in the world, they're the largest exporter of goods in the world. So they are nipping at our heels, and the only nominal thing left is GDP.
So we understand even today this story is moving. Tariffs increase. The president's considering putting tariffs on fish, petroleum, chemicals, handbags, up to $200 billion. Why do you think he's doing that? And from what your numbers say, does he need to do this?
I think what President Trump is doing with China, and I've said this week, Brian, is the most important thing that he will do in his presidency. President Obama was right to talk about pivoting to Asia. Unfortunately, we never did. And so what we've done over the past 20 or 30 years is watch China rise, and we've somewhat ignored it. We've continued to let them steal our IP through theft. And so this is countering them, getting fair trade, dealing with them on IP, and making a level playing field in the world is the most important thing that this president will do.
Yesterday, looks like the Senate's going to approve a defense package that tightens security on Chinese corporations, deals, and revamps export controls on technologies. Democrats and Republicans agreeing on something.
Should be. Yeah. Elizabeth Warren actually compliments the president president on this.
Right.
And so is Bernie Sanders as it relates to trade. There's a CFIUS, something called CFIUS, that's going through the Congress as well, and that is again to tighten the restrictions on companies. What's really important, though, which we don't talk about, is how American companies who do business in China get harassed there. Josh Rogan from the Washington Post has written about this extensively. Senator Marco Rubio has talked about this. You have major American corporations that go there, and if they mention Taiwan or Tibet on their website, the Chinese freak out and make them regurgitate Chinese communist propaganda in order to stay in the country.
It's humiliating, and Google's doing the same.
American companies should not be doing this.
Absolutely, and Google's revamping their system
Right.
to limit freedom. For you to walk away with one thing from this segment, how about this?
Yeah.
China's One Belt, One Road initiative.
Yes.
They're rebuilding these impoverished countries' infrastructure, but then they're giving them loans, so they're on the hook. Pakistan is basically subservient to China right now.
And I thought it was really important that Pompeo spoke out against any sort of IMF bailout. So if we go back to our high school history class and we remember the ancient Silk Roads, this is what China is redoing, is bringing back to life with the One Belt, One Road initiative. It goes over 68 countries, 65% of the world's population, 40% of the world's GDP. So what this is these are both land-based routes and maritime routes where China is seeking to integrate itself once again with the Middle East and with Europe, and to really, they want to take control over the shipping lanes, over the sea roads, over the land routes. They don't want to have the American Navy controlling the South China Sea.
We will see what we're going to do to stop it, because if you alert people about it, you educate the American public, they'll be behind it, because there is a problem with one country trying to dominate and leave other countries, giving them loans they can't possibly pay back.
Yes.
Morgan, great job over the last few days.
Thank you for having me for 4 days on this. I think it's really important. And
It's
I appreciate
been our pleasure. Now you can get some rest. Meanwhile, come straight ahead. A federal judge ripping prosecutors for focusing on Paul Manafort's lavish lifestyle. What can we expect on day 3 of this trial? Judge Napolitano is usually walking, sometimes standing, as he walks to our set. Today, on the final day of our series, China, Friend or Foe, we focus on the country's economic threat to the U.S. Here to break it down is former State Department press officer Morgan Ortagus, who's still active in the military. Morgan, great to see you. So you also believe that China has overtaken us, even though the numbers say we're still leading.
So if you look at nominal GDP, China is the second largest economy in the world. However, if you look at purchasing power, they're the largest economy. If you look at, they're the largest manufacturer in the world. They're the largest exporter of goods in the world. So they are nipping at our heels, and the only nominal thing left is GDP.
So we understand even today this story is moving. Tariffs increase. The president's considering putting tariffs on fish, petroleum, chemicals, handbags, up to $200 billion. Why do you think he's doing that? And from what your numbers say, does he need to do this?
I think what President Trump is doing with China, and I've said this week, Brian, is the most important thing that he will do in his presidency. President Obama was right to talk about pivoting to Asia. Unfortunately, we never did. And so what we've done over the past 20 or 30 years is watch China rise, and we've somewhat ignored it. We've continued to let them steal our IP through theft. And so this is countering them, getting fair trade, dealing with them on IP, and making a level playing field in the world is the most important thing that this president will do.
Yesterday, looks like the Senate's going to approve a defense package that tightens security on Chinese corporations, deals, and revamps export controls on technologies. Democrats and Republicans agreeing on something.
It should be. Yeah. Elizabeth Warren actually compliments the president on this.
Right.
And so is Bernie Sanders as it relates to trade. There's a CFIUS, something called CFIUS, that's going through the Congress as well, and that is again to tighten the restrictions on companies. What's really important, though, which we don't talk about, is how American companies who do business in China get harassed there. Josh Rogan from the Washington Post has written about this extensively. Senator Marco Rubio has talked about this. You have major American corporations that go there, and if they mention Taiwan or Tibet on their website, the Chinese freak out and make them regurgitate Chinese communist propaganda in order to stay in the country.
It's humiliating, and Google's doing the same.
American companies should not be doing this.
Absolutely, and Google's revamping their system to limit freedom. For you to walk away with one thing from this segment, how about this? China's One Belt, One Road initiative. They're rebuilding these impoverished countries' infrastructure, but then they're giving them loans, so they're on the hook. Pakistan is basically subservient to China right now.
And I thought it was really important that Pompeo spoke out against any sort of IMF bailout. So if we go back to our high school history class and we remember the ancient Silk Roads, this is what China is redoing, is bringing back to life with the One Belt, One Road initiative. It goes over 68 countries, 65% of the world's population, 40% of the world's GDP. So what this is these are both land-based routes and maritime routes where China is seeking to integrate itself once again with the Middle East and with Europe, and to really, they want to take control over the shipping lanes, over the sea roads, over the land routes. They don't want to have the American Navy controlling the South China Sea.
We will see what we're going to do to stop it, because if you alert people about it, you educate the American public, they'll be behind it, because there is a problem with one country trying to dominate and leave other countries, giving them loans they can't possibly pay back.
Yes.
Morgan, great job over the last few days.
Thank you for having me for 4 days on this. I think it's really important.
It's been our pleasure. Now you can get some rest. Meanwhile, come straight ahead. A federal judge ripping prosecutors